All right. Good morning, everyone. Once again, it's a beautiful sunshiny day here in Nairobi. It's exactly 10 a.m. this morning, and we are going to kick off our webinar session today, where our focus will be on RADWIN, and we'll be looking at wireless broadband beyond your imagination. On this webinar session today, my co-panelist is Ted DeBoer, who's my colleague from South Africa, our sister company called Miro, who's part of the Hudaco group of companies. He seems to have dropped off the call, but he will be with us shortly. Mwema Maimu, I can see you on the call. Thank you very much for taking your time to be with us this morning. Just some house cleaning matters before we kick off. On your bottom right of your screen, you will see an icon with a Q. Please use that to post any questions that you might have, and we will answer them as we move along. We also have a chat box that is for ease of use towards your far right of your screen. Please feel free to use that as well to type in any of your questions, and we will respond to them as we go along. Just to kick us off, I just want to reconfirm that you can hear me loud and clear. Please use your chat box to respond so that we can kick off. Thank you, Benita. Thank you, Maimu. Appreciate it. Ted, thank you for joining us. We are just going to kick off right now, and I will, once I do the introduction, I will hand over to you so that you can take us through our session for today. Just to give you, thanks, Ted, just to give you an introduction into Hudaco Kenya, I will be sharing my screen with you shortly. Please confirm that you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
I can see it, yeah.
Fantastic, great stuff. So we'll just kick off with a brief introduction to Hudaco Kenya and what we do and how we see ourselves in the market as far as empowering partners that we work with is concerned. So Hudaco Kenya is part of the Hudaco group of industries companies, which is a leading supplier of quality, innovative, integrated security, IP-enabled voice and video and telecommunication solutions. And our footprint is across East Africa and into Sub-Saharan Africa. We believe that IP technology is the future for communication, and it should be easily accessible to everyone. And we've got our team of IP converged professionals such as Ted and the rest of the team sitting both in Kenya and in South Africa, who are dedicated to taking your business to the next level. We totally believe that we are here to empower you to connect communities. What we also boast of is 17 years of industrial knowledge. Again, as I said, across East Africa. We are able to sell not only into Eastern Africa, but into Central Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. We do have an array of ICT solutions, which I will take you through. And we believe in empowering the partners that we work with. And especially during these COVID times, we've had to re-energize our teams as well as look at different avenues to empower you, and such as the online webinar session that we're having today. And just to mention that we do have webinar sessions every Friday. We've got a session at 10 a.m. and a session at 12 p.m. Kenyan time. And we welcome you to join us in this journey of technical knowledge. In addition to that, we are also very active in our social media handles. Please follow us at Hudaco Kenya on LinkedIn. And we'll soon be starting up our YouTube channel, where we'll be posting some of the webinar sessions that we have and will be easily accessible to you post the sessions that we have. In addition to that, we just want to focus a little bit around some of the solutions that that we sell. We've got a whole array of solutions, and our approach to the market is basically being able to deliver tailor-made solutions. Of course, this is backed up by a team of experts who understand the solutions, who understand the market, and are therefore there to readily deliver and help you manage the solutions for your clients. Some of the solutions that we have, are categorized based on what you see on the screen. Some of these brands that we work with are Bitcom and Teltonica from an LTE perspective. We've got Wi-Fi solutions such as Ubiquiti, Cambium, Microtik, Grandstream, as well as our focus for today, which is RADWIN. We've got infrastructure solutions, again, that basically cut across some of the brands that I've talked about. From a security perspective, we focus on Uniview, Access, Cambium using their CN Vision. From a networking perspective, again, which is going to be our focus today, is going to be on RADWIN, but we have other technologies such as Microtik and Ubiquiti. We are also very keen in Internet of Things and have partnered with a company called Teltonica, who is able to provide us with this kind of solutions. From a support perspective, again, as I mentioned, we do have an array of technical engineers who are able to provide these solutions, as well as provide you with technical support, which is what we believe is a real key element in being able to service your clients. All the technologies that we sell into the regions that we're in are rather go through a rigorous legal compliance process, and we make sure that we've got certification from the relevant authorities in the countries that we sell into to ensure that we are giving you top of notch brands that you can work with. We also understand during these COVID times, very trying times, and all businesses are struggling to just keep abreast, as we hope and look forward to better times. And because we understand this, we've got a finance team and a finance process that allows us to be able to help you service your clients and give you credit facilities with us that can range from anything between 7 and 30 days. We are very convinced that training and skills and empowering our teams, both internal and external, is what makes us different from the rest. And we are continuously putting up sessions and webinar sessions, interactive sessions, where we can allow you to have access to our teams and therefore gain access to the technologies that we have. So at this juncture, I'd like to hand over the session to my colleague, Ted. Ted, over to you, and thank you very much for taking time to be with us this morning.
Hi, Terry. Yeah, sure. Of course, not a problem. It's a little bit early, but let's get going. Let me see if I can share my my screen here. All right. Can you see it there?
Yes, we can, Ted. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Will you just let me know if there are any questions?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will, Ted.
Cool, no problem. Let's get started. All right. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to this RADWIN webinar. I see we also have some South Africans, fellow South Africans, joining the party today. Yeah, so today I'll be going a little bit into the definition of what is RADWIN and how they see the future of fixed wireless. So RADWIN's been in the game for quite a long time, since the early 2000s, where they started off with some very basic but high-end point-to-point links. RADWIN is inherently a telco-grade, mission-critical sort of product. So it comes from a telco sort of scenario, and it's now sort of trickling down into the WISP market as well. So you have a very high-end, very capable sort of product, and that is now even evolving further in the sense that there are better versions available of the current equipment, and there's some nice peeks into the future that I'll be introducing you to today as well. So rather than doing a very basic overview of what is on sale today, I will be doing an overview of RADWIN itself, and then give you sort of a glimpse of future products that are to come in this year and the next, which I also think should be very much applicable to Kenya and surrounding countries in itself, because there's no reason why certain parts of the world should, be more prone to the latest technology than others. If the US can do it, then why not Kenya as well? Right, so let's get started. I'll quickly do some background. I won't take too long and nag on about this, because it's typically not the most interesting bits. But yeah, just to go over the industrial ages. So the story that I'm about to tell you will create the why behind what RADWIN is doing, in the sense of the products that they are developing. So of course, first off, we had mechanization, then mass production of products. The third industrial age was the digital revolution and globalization. So basically the boundaries of distance between countries fell away. You could easily phone someone on the other side of the world. And then the fourth industrial age, or the fourth industrial revolution that we are entering now, is one of automation, analytics, and IoT, as Terry already mentioned. But yeah, the quote there below, the Financial Times reported in 2016 that between 2000 and 2010, of all the jobs lost in the US, over 85% were lost to new technologies. Whether or not that's a bad thing, it's something that is in fact very important. So just with regards to the current situation and how everybody is now working with COVID-19, let's have a look at how the workplace looked before computers. I don't think anybody can imagine now, as you can see on the left-hand side, that people are actually smoking in the office. And if you look to the right-hand side, those things in the back there are actually not photocopiers, they are file cabinets. It's really hard to picture how things used to be and how they came to be as of today. So if you have a look here, circa 1980, the workplace is constantly transforming. So the introduction of computers and how the workplace is currently, obviously with COVID-19, social distancing is of the utmost importance. So everybody is working from home. That's why I included circa 2020, but pre-March. And then the workplace of tomorrow actually was accelerated and is happening today. So working from home, and thus also very soon to be something called virtual reality. So in essence, where we're going, or how RADWIN sees it, is that we will be joining a boardroom, as you can see on the right-hand side, but it won't be you, it will be in sort of an avatar of you that looks like you, but you're not physically there. But you do experience it being there as in virtual reality, like you would be there in real life. Now, video calling and video conferencing and webinars and the like already take up a good bit of data. It's not that much. The uplink that I'm using for this minimum requirement is about 2 megs. But if you'll have a look at the requirements for VR, even basic VR needs at least 25 megabits of bandwidth. And if we're going into extreme VR in a couple of years, 8K by 8K visual field with 4K equivalent TV resolution, then you're looking at in excess of 1 gigabit per second just to have smooth play, and almost over 2 gigabits per second for interactive play. So if we're moving towards that, that means that the technology has to move with this as well. And obviously that's where RADWIN started to design their ideas around this with a couple of very big partners in the world. If you have a look at this is the current layout of the availability of what the US Federal Communications Commission considers to be broadband, which is 25 megs down, 3 megs up. which should be sufficient for 4K streaming at least. And this is the availability, and then this is where it's not available, where it's still required, where there's no level of broadband that can match the minimum required standard. So technically speaking, there's a lot of work left to be done. This is now an example from the US, but I can guarantee you that it's pretty much like this in most of the rest of the world, where distances and densities are similar to the US, like, for example, South Africa and the rest of Africa. Rural areas have a massive lack of high-speed internet. As you can see here, the US, there's still about 9.4 million people in 2016 in the US using the old school dial-up modems. Let me just go on here. So then another thing you need to think about is the over-the-top broadband strategy of these huge companies that you see here, the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook. So if you look at Amazon, for example, they are busy with something called Project Kuiper, which is similar to SpaceX. And the thought behind this is, why would a big company like Amazon be reliant on other telcos to have their services and their products that are trying to sell to you, to the end customer? Why would they have that service be reliant on third-party telcos? Because if they go down, they can't sell anything to you. So what they're aiming for is to address these services directly to the end customer. By doing that, they need their own network, and satellites are the way to go. As you can see here, OneWeb has since gone bankrupt, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, Starlink, I believe there's another launch from them tomorrow, which is not satellites, but it's the first manned space flight launching from the US in 9 years. So it's pretty cool to watch if you have some time tomorrow. But yeah, getting back to the point, fixed wireless access in that sense is projected to have the biggest compacted growth over the next 5 years in the US, which is forecasted for the US. But I'm sure that it will definitely be similar in countries that have a similar layout across the world. So looking at South Africa in that sense, we're looking at a fiber reach of about 4.7%. Now, until and when these sort of satellite services become prevalent and accessible, there is still a massive need to fill this other 95.3% gap. And the only way to do that is via wireless. And this is, of course, where RADWIN comes in with a set of products, the 5 gigahertz of which is obviously the most known, but there are some awesome new technologies coming very, very soon. So I'll just take you through what RADWIN has done over the past couple of years. They introduced GPS and TDD sync already in 2004. There's a lot of other companies still sort of trying to catch up in getting that right and getting it to work perfectly. Then RADWIN started to do TDMA point-to-multipoint, or time division multiple access point-to-multipoint. RADWIN has its own proprietary airframe, which is built up from scratch, so they don't take anybody else's software and customize it, with a logo and trying to make it work. RADWIN went and wrote their software for the chipset from scratch to ensure that it adheres to a very high availability standard for the telcos. Then in 2013, they added non-line of sight backhaul on 5 gigahertz, which is pretty amazing, which means you can also use it even in tunnels, for example. And then in 2015, they launched the first beamforming antenna, the one we still know today. The second generation beamforming has been launched in 2018, the first of which went up this week in South Africa. We're seeing an 8 decibel increase in performance in signal levels, which is quite amazing. And then, of course, in 2020, we'll be seeing the launch of 60 gigahertz teragraph mesh, as well as outland TV white space. Right, so with regards to the interference mitigation on RADWIN, it's difficult to explain in the sense that RADWIN is entirely different in its approach to the wireless market as most other competitors are. So I'll just give you a quick overview. What the RADWIN does, it's an integrated antenna with smart beamforming and beam steering, which only addresses one CPE at a time, up to 64 time slots. So effectively, you can have 64 CPEs in a sector, and it addresses one CPE in an 8-degree beam width. Very small side lobes, so it doesn't pick up the interference, as you can see here, as easily, and it doesn't create interference for itself as easily as well. With this, it will only address one CPE at a time, as I said, and in doing so, the other CPEs are quiet and not spoken to. They don't make any noise. So it's a much more effective way of communicating and mitigating interference. Now, there's a whole array of other RADWIN proprietary technologies in the airframe. When I say airframe, it means their TDMA sort of protocol, but a lot more than that, actually. RADWINs only speak to RADWINs. You can't pick up a RADWIN radio with another Wi-Fi radio and so forth. So it's very highly inherently secure as well. So if there's some secure communication that needs to be done, RADWIN is also definitely your go-to. A couple of the technologies I will mention, so automatic adaptive rate. So the RADWIN will adjust its modulation and channel bandwidth per CPE, per direction, per transmission, actually, in order to get the data to the other side as well as possible, in a sense of what the frequency climate allows. So if it's very interfered, it will reduce the channel bandwidth, it will reduce the modulation, just to ensure the best possible connection to the CPE. It has forward error correction as well, which means it adds parity bytes to the transmission, so that if the transmission gets damaged somehow, it has parity bytes to fix those packets, so that you don't need to retransmit. If you don't need to retransmit, it means you have lower latencies as well. Then there's advanced automatic repeat request, which means if it does something goes wrong with the transmission, it automatically already requests a retransmission by default. And then, of course, there's what they call OFDM, or orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, which means a channel is divided in a whole bunch of subchannels that go in different directions and might reflect, but carrying the same sort of data, so that at least you can ensure that one of those channels arrives on the other end. Again, ensuring that mission critical necessity of the data transmission getting to the other end. So our channel manager or channel partner, Nick Urki from South Africa, always says, when do you implement RADWIN? You implement RADWIN if it's loss of life, loss of reputation, or loss of revenue. It's a good one to remember. Then, of course, there's the intra and inter-site GPS sync. So the RADWIN high sites are all synced to each other, even if it's another network from another provider. If they've got RADWIN and they leave the GPS settings as per default, they will not interfere with your RADWINs, as long as they're on a different channel, of course. But they all transmit at the same time, they all receive at the same time. And then, of course, there's automatic channel selection, meaning that if there's interference in a set channel, the RADWIN will move itself over to another. And then last but not least, continuous non-interrupted transmission, meaning even if there's no data to pass to a CPE, it will still make a connection to the CPE and send empty packets, just in order to occupy the space in the air, so that it has that space available at all times, and it doesn't allow any other radios to intervene there, making sure that you can transmit when you need to transmit. And then in 2015, RADWIN obviously launched the smart antenna with beam steering, bidirectional beam forming. It's actually able to bounce signals off a building or an object in order to get around a tree or another building or something to that effect. Very, very cool. Right, as I said, in order to get a transmission or get the best sort of transmission to a subscriber unit, the RADWIN will automatically, so this is all default settings, it will automatically decide what sort of channel bandwidth and what sort of modulation it can do to the subscriber unit in both directions, per subscriber unit, per direction. Very, very awesome. It will then ensure reliable connectivity to the best of its ability per transmission every single time. So rather get, you know, a less faster connection than no connection at all when you're trying to use up too much airspace or try and use a too high modulation. It's all adaptive. It will all adjust itself to the situation in the air at that current point in time. Right, so here's a little bit of a case study. Sinopec is the second largest company in the world by revenue. It's a oil company in China, and what they required was just 10 megabits of CIR data, or committed information rate data, to their oil rigs. And the only company that was able to deliver that constantly was RADWIN. Let me just go back one slide. There we go. And this is what the test looked like. And even if you put all your CPEs this close to each other, the RADWIN can still all address them individually without them interfering to each other, which is an absolutely amazing feat. I will go to the next slide. This is a slide with Komatsu, who has appointed RADWIN to provide the communication with a fiber in motion mobility product to a autonomous vehicle, or autonomous dump truck in this regard, which is pretty amazing. I mean, the amount of data that needs to go to this truck, just with sheer cameras and all the telemetry that needs to go to it. Low latency is obviously required. They picked RADWIN to provide their communication, which is pretty cool. For the people here from BitGo, we have a nice case study surrounding BitGo, which I can send to you after the fact. But yeah, BitGo did a head-to-head test with some of the competitive products, and RADWIN definitely came out on top. Also able to deliver the much better capacity than a 2 gigahertz licensed network. So the unlicensed Jet did way better than the licensed product ever could, and did much better than the competition as well. Then another one in Cape Town is Wabernet. There used to be a quote here, but it was ever so slightly foul language that was used, but it came to the point where the RADWIN Jet that they tried and loved didn't give a you know what about noise. So whether or not there's a whole lot of other radios in the area, the RADWIN will still perform very, very well, or at least much better than anything else they've ever tried before. So with regards to the RADWIN fixed wireless access strategy going forward, as opposed to the satellites that will eventually start taking up a lot of the rural business, as well as maybe even in denser areas, RADWIN has now started with Facebook to create Terragraph. So Terragraph will be a technology open access standard that any of the other vendors can use, but it was developed by RADWIN with Facebook to supply a 60 gigahertz mesh topology. So rather than point-to-point in 60 gigahertz or point-to-multipoint, it's a full mesh topology. So it means it can automatically direct traffic by itself and make it go where it needs to go, pick the fastest route, and also do load balancing. Pick the route to where the fastest uplink is. Then, of course, the well-known Jet Sub-6 portfolio and the evolution thereof with second generation beamforming. And then in the third slide, you'll see TV Whitespace in cooperation with Microsoft. So another very big company that has picked RADWIN to develop a new technology. Now, TV Whitespace is very cool because TV Whitespace plays in the sub 1 gigahertz spectrum. Meaning that it has very, very good propagation characteristics, meaning it can go very far. In this case, RADWIN has limited the distance to about 20 kilometers, but it does mean that it can go through objects, cross some hills. So in bad terrain and in a very high density vegetation terrain, it will still be able to deliver a very high capacity, up to 150 megs to a subscriber and 300 megs in a sector, which none of the other competitors in TV whitespace products have achieved thus far. But yeah, this is Microsoft and RADWIN's approach to delivering rural broadband. Might not even be necessary to have TV whitespace to a house. It can even be used as a sort of a backhaul and then spread Wi-Fi or fixed wireless access across the town, because 150 meg uplink is still better than nothing. And then last but not least, you'll see the OSS solution, which is RADWIN's software toolset that allows you to do everything from planning to rolling out to integration and management as well. So the second generation beamforming I spoke about. So this is a Jet Duo, which is basically 2 Jet Pros in a box. So it's a dual carrier in one unit. But what it does feature is a second generation beamforming. So what RADWIN has done, rather than throwing in MIMO and also other technologies that are still pretty much in the very first stages of development, they've opted and picked to go with further developing the technology that they already have. So what happened was that they managed to further decrease those site lobes I spoke about in the beginning, meaning that the Jet is now even less prone to picking up or generating interference. As I said, I just spoke to a client of mine in Cape Town this morning, and they have implemented the first Jet Duo in South Africa. And the signal levels have improved by up to 8 dBs, which is extremely significant as compared to the first generation. I have heard that the third generation, which completely eliminates side lobes, might also be launched this year, but I'm not 100% sure. Right, so this particular unit offers 1.5 gigabits per second in 190-degree sector, dual carrier radios. For now, it is capable of handling 64 subscribers, but that will be upgraded with a later firmware update. It was supposed to be April, but it will be delayed by a little bit. And then after that, there will be another update which will allow the CPEs to jump by themselves from the one carrier to the other, should there be any sort of form of interference. As you can see here, the orange line on the right-hand side is the current Pro. So you'll see it has a little bit higher gain. So the Jet Duo will sacrifice a little bit of gain, but you'll see on the blue line that the first 2 side lobes are significantly less as opposed to the initial Jet Pro. So sacrificing a little bit of gain has allowed them to design the beam pattern such that it will pick up less interference, be less affected, and be much more efficient. This is just an example from Maputo, where they already put in the Jet Duo, but it's a Jet Duo with 3.5 gig as well, but it's the same sort of antenna technology. You'll see here that between the first generation and the second generation, there's anywhere from about 4 to 5 to even 10 dBs of improvement with regards to the signal on both the subscriber side and the base station side, which is amazing. Right, so again, as I said earlier, if there's interference, as you can see here to the right-hand side, this subscriber unit can then decide to hop over and go to the second carrier. This will be a software feature that will be launched fairly soon. It's just a firmware upgrade, so nothing else is required other than upgrading the firmware. Right, so with regards to the over-the-top strategies, we already spoke about Amazon and Iridium and Kuiper, the satellite project. OneWeb is obviously not a player anymore, but of course SpaceX still is. And then the 2 other big players, Facebook and Microsoft, have opted to go with RADWIN as their approach to getting their sort of services directly to the client, and what is the best way to make sure that everybody's hooked up to the internet. more people are hooked up to the internet, the more people they can advertise to, which is, the more people use their services, and the more revenue they can make, of course. But in order to do that, you need a good product, you need a reliable product. And other than going into space, they thought of the next best thing. Now, the first of which is RADWIN, or the Terragraph product from RADWIN and Facebook. This is a 60 gigahertz mesh topology product. So as you can see here on the right-hand side, this will be launched fairly soon in South Africa. Point-to-multipoint 60 gig outdoors still currently is not fully regulated. So you are allowed to go point-to-point. So there's a little bit of a gray area. I'm not 100% sure how it currently works in Kenya. But just to inform you about the availability of this, you're looking at a site capacity or a pole capacity of 14.3 gigabits per second, fully fledged beamforming antenna, and it's pretty amazing what this can do. There will be other vendors also building this, but RADWIN will be the first to market, and it will have the most features as opposed to the competition as well. So, for example, this is a plot from Camps Bay. These folks here did not want to have aerial fiber rolled out, and they voted against trenching of fiber as well. And the density is of such a level that it's fairly difficult to do 5 gigahertz point-to-multipoint here, because there's just a little bit too many clients in a dense area. And they did a plot with Terragraph mesh here. And this is definitely the way to go forward. I mean, you can deliver more than a gigabit to a subscriber, which definitely opens up the future for virtual reality and everything else that goes with it. Then the second technology that is extremely important for both South Africa and the rest of Africa, because it addresses rural communities so well. So RADWIN calls it Outland. It's a TV white space solution, meaning it uses the frequency spectrum between 470 and 698 megahertz. So sub 1 gigahertz. As you know, 2.4 gigahertz goes much further than 5, as does sub 1 gigahertz go much further than 2.4 gigahertz. In that sense, if it doesn't necessarily go far, so RADWIN limited it to 20 kilometers in the airframe, that does mean that it can go through a lot of objects. So, if you have bad line of sight or no line of sight, or there's mountains in the way or hills even, this TV white space is what you need to be looking at. On the RADWIN side of things, it will have a nice old school lengthy sector. It looks like one of the cell phone sectors rather than a Yagi antenna, so it looks a bit better as well. Subscriber unit on the right hand side is an integrated flat panel. It's not much bigger than a laptop really. It looks really cool, and with this you will be able to deliver very high capacity through very difficult terrain into rural areas, and then you can deploy other types of services again to distribute internet. So if you can have a look here, this is a 5 gigahertz coverage map from one high site, where you would be able to reach maybe 100, 200 subscribers. And this is what it looks like if you add TV white space. So much wider range, much more areas are eligible for service. Very interesting stuff. And I mentioned when you hit a town with, say, for example, TV white space, you can then redeploy a different sort of lower cost point-to-multipoint system. RADWIN has thought of that as well, because of the fact that the jet could be fairly costly in order for entry-level sort of services. They have developed a multi-sector. Now this is the same as you saw earlier with the Jet Duo, but in a different antenna setup. So these are again 2 750 meg radios within one unit, but it's a passive 180-degree antenna. So no smart beamforming, but it does have passive, what you might call it, a passive antenna array that knows where the CPEs are, just because of the GPS synchronization. So in that sense, the unit that you'll see on the other end is actually another passive antenna which does not have a radio built into it. So these hook up to each other, and we're looking at a cost of I think it was around about 20,000, 25,000 Rand odd for this whole kit. You can cover a good kilometer or two in 360 degrees with one little hop base station micro pop multi-sector is what it's called. Right, so it kind of looks like this. The single multi-sector provides 180-degree coverage. You can add a passive antenna on the other end, or you can have another one of those multi-sectors on the other end and have 4 750 meg radios, should you need the capacity. But this is RADWIN's sort of low-cost option to go into the market and cover sort of smaller areas, still high capacity, still a lot of subscribers, but it's a more cost-effective way into the market. And then, of course, because of the fact that the secondary antenna at the back is a passive antenna, you don't necessarily need to have this 180-degree antenna attached to it to the back. What you can also do is remove the other one you see on the other end and put in, for example, a point-to-point dish antenna. So this unit can use one of its radios to link to the next town, for example. So you're only covering from one side 180 degrees, and then the other secondary radio you hook up via TNC connectors to, say, for example, either a dish or an RF Elements horn antenna, and then you can point that at the next remote village and do the same thing there. So much more cost-effective option of rolling out in rural communities, what that is concerned. Then I'll talk a little bit about the OSS toolset. Right, so the guys from Bitco will already know this. The OSS toolset starts with R Planner. You will have to complete RADWIN training in order to get access to the R Planner, but the R Planner is necessary in order to do appropriate planning for your network, and that R Planner will then allow you to create coverage maps. The coverage maps link to a program called SET, or Service Estimation Tool, that you can integrate into your website, and it allows you to do an availability check. Now, eventually, this will be integrated with both TerraGraph and TV Whitespace as well. So you will have all three of your services integrated into one tool. So whichever one is closest or has the best signal will be able to link up and get a deployment option with WinDeploy, which then sends an order to your technicians to go and install a specific service at a specific client with all the details that you need based upon the GPS planning that you've done before. And then when that's done, it gets uploaded back into WinManage, and from WinManage you can manage all your base stations and your CPEs accordingly. And the only part of this that actually costs any money is WinManage itself, which will, I think going forward, will go completely into the cloud, but I'm not 100% sure. But this is still quite a while away. So looking at R Planner, from the desktop, you'll be doing coverage planning, frequency planning, network sizing, as well as reporting and analytics. So it will tell you what goes well or what goes wrong where. And then, of course, it will assure you to only sort of put down the equipment that you need without overspecking or underspecking. It also helps you to reduce your operating costs, because if planning is done right, you'll know that the product will work right, and that means you don't have to go out and fix stuff afterwards, or redo it again because it wasn't done well from the start. All that sort of good stuff. It optimizes your network entirely. Then the service estimation tool, as I said, is a tool that takes the information from R Planner and gives you a good idea, or at least gives your customers a good idea of where they can get service. And this is done entirely without a line of sight surveys being 100% necessary from the start. You'll have a good idea of what sort of service you can deliver where and where not, just with the planning done. This also means, of course, that you don't lose a customer that easily, because you don't need to go out and find the time of day that he's available in order to go to site and see if there's line of sight. You can all do that from the service estimation tool. And then, of course, Win Deploy Manager is a tool that can send either small or large deployments through dispatching to your technical teams. They'll then receive the order, and they'll know what to do and where to do it and where to install. And it also helps you to retrieve then installation reports. So images of the installation done, so that a client can't go and mess things up and then blame you for it afterwards. Yeah, as you can see here, it's a tool to easily manage installations and task assignments. Gives you a great overview of what is available, where the sectors are, because it pulls the information from our planner. It improves coordination between the installation teams and the network operating center as well, and it ensures that your installations are of a very high quality level. Again, meaning that you don't have to go and fix things, which means you can focus on rolling out your network further. This video is not going to work properly, so I'm just going to skip it. The same with WinTouch. There's a video for this as well. But basically what it comes down to is that WinDeploy will send information to WinTouch, which is, for example, the phone or the iPad or whatever it is from the installation team, that will receive all the information for the installation that they're going to do. This unit will then scan the QR code at the back of the subscriber unit. It will link over 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and then it will send the information on configuration details to the subscriber unit. So then the only thing you need to do is the actual alignment. So it simplifies the installation process for the installer. It shortens the installation time, and it only allows you to close the installation when the appropriate service has been sort of locked into place. So if you've got your speed out of it and the alignment is done properly, then it allows the technician to close this specific installation process. Right, so the video is up next. I'm going to skip that, but you can find this on RADWIN's YouTube channel. Then I'd like to introduce you to WinTouch 2.0. So WinTouch 2.0 will be the same, but it will have augmented reality. So your installer can use their cell phone and the camera therein based on GPS. It will see the base stations that are close by. Obviously, with very short distance type of stuff, it's much easier, especially if you know where your base station is. But if you have a good couple and the area that you're trying to serve looks like this, it might be very difficult to pick up the base stations by sight alone. So this way, it allows you to zoom and pick up base stations. They will actually show up in your screen, and if you click them, it will give you the distance to the base station, for example. And this is, of course, a service that will be integrated with Telegraph as well as TV Whitespace also. So if you have a base station that's 20 kilometers away, then of course this is an extremely handy tool to use. You don't necessarily need technicians and installers that have an extremely high level of expertise. So it simplifies the installation even further. And this is also very soon to be launched. Very nice feature from the RADWIN OSS toolset. I believe this is pretty much everything from my side. I'd like to thank you for attending. It was pretty short and sweet. Are there any questions, perhaps? Terry?
Thank you so much, Ted. Thank you for that insightful session. We've learned a lot in regards to the positioning of RADWIN. At this time, I have no questions in the chat box, but I welcome you all to send your questions if there are any.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope you have a great day further.
Thank you so much, Ted. I don't seem to see any questions. Maybe at this time we will just bring the session to a close. Thank you, everybody, once again for taking your time to be with us this morning. Both Ted and myself are available to you. Should you have any questions, you will receive an automated message after this session with our contact details. So please feel free to reach out to us. Ted's email address is ted@miro.co.za. Mine is terry@hudaco.africa. Thank you again so much for taking your time. We appreciate it. Oh, there's a question here from Ted.
Yeah,
there's a question here. Yes, yes. Maybe you can just respond to it.
When the signal gets bad and you can't adjust the frequency remotely anymore, the tech has to go to site to align it. Yeah, so the signal doesn't necessarily just get bad. That's where RADWIN differs a lot from other products. So as I said, RADWIN features constant non-interrupted transmission. So when you have aligned the CPE appropriately, and you've locked it into place, nothing else should be able to deteriorate the radio signal unless there is a tree that grows in between the link, or they maybe build a building in between the link, or maybe somebody who doesn't like you very much goes and puts his dish and aims it directly into your CPE. Then maybe yes, the signal might get bad. But because of the fact that the RADWIN always keeps transmitting, it never allows any other radio to go into that part of the spectrum that it's occupying. So it's a really sort of aggressive sort of radio. It really takes up the space for you, and because it's like that, it actually automatically kind of sort of forces competitors to move their radios away from yours because they just won't work. So if your alignment is done appropriately the first time around, you should not have any issues going forward. I hope that answers the question.
All right.
Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you, Ted. I was just giving you know, the participants a moment to be able to respond. And yes, Maimu has confirmed that yes, that response addresses his question.
Okay. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions coming from the team. So at this point, I'd just like to wish you all a good day. Please follow us on our LinkedIn page at Hudaco Kenya to keep abreast on our you know, following webinar sessions, as well as to, you know, have close interaction with our teams. Thank you once again, and wish you all a fabulous day ahead and a great weekend. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.